The situation in Syria, of course, is tragic. And it was expected to become tragic simply because of what I have mentioned a few minutes ago. It's ruled by ideological political system. When ideology intervenes with the ruling system, it becomes extremely dangerous to its people and to its neighbors as well. Ideology was not present in Egypt and never been. In Syria, there was a political ideology ruling. It still is the Ba'ath Party, the Ba'ath ideology. And this is where the trouble comes from. They are not willing to accommodate the aspirations of their people. They have no problem of killing 30,000, and with the hope that one day soon that the Syrian people will calm down and things will continue or fall back onto what they had before. It's impossible. What to do, the course of action towards Syria, of course, differs, as you have said. It's very complicated because of its geographical location, because of its close ties to Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it's difficult how to deal with them. But as far as Egypt is concerned, we still have our embassy in Damascus. We haven't lost hope yet that with some sort of pressure from neighboring countries and from international players as well, that we might have an outcome that would maybe try to find a political outcome out of the situation. I don't think we might have an outcome similar to what we had in Libya. We don't think so. I don't think so. I might be proven wrong in 6 months' time. But at the moment, Egypt still holds some hope that at a certain point, maybe the regime in Syria would recognize the fact that they cannot continue. And maybe they will have to do some sacrifices in the road and maybe open up within a framework, a national framework. And this is the essence of what our President Morsi have tried to do by engaging Iran, engaging Turkey, engaging group four, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. He has asked that a group, these 4 countries, maybe try their luck. I know Mr. Annan tried. I know Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi, he's today in Egypt. He was yesterday in China. But frankly speaking, it doesn't seem that the regime in Syria, at least the top of them, because of the ideological reasons, are willing to compromise anything. And this is, and by taking this position, actually, they are actually wasting opportunities that a peaceful exit for them could be organized or some sort of. So again, I understand the Ba'ath would like to secure their presence in the future Syria. At a certain point, they might be tempted to sacrifice al-Assad himself as a president, but we have reached to a point that even the opposition is not willing to compromise. The leadership is not willing to compromise, and I'm afraid we are left with the situation on the ground to evolve, and to a certain point when somebody really feels the heat, then he would move.
Thank you, Mr. Refaat.
We are against interventions, by the way. Egypt is against forcible interventions.
Many of you probably remember Prime Minister Netanyahu's presentation to the Security Council, where he talked about where Israel's red line is and where the United States and Israel's allies' red line should be. In the foreign policy debate between Governor Romney and President Obama, there was a bit of confusion on the parts of some of whether Governor Romney's red line had changed or whether it become the same as the president's. But there's been a lot of interesting news lately. For instance, a report in Haaretz talks about how Israel was close to launching an attack against Iran, but Iran decided to defer a great amount of its uranium towards medical uses, thereby delaying what Israeli intelligence, U.S. intelligence, IEA, believes could be another 8 to 12 months. I'd be interested to know, Mr. Gilad, if you feel that that was sort of a give and take, whether you feel like that's a signal from the Iranian government. Also, there's some reports in the news that there may be a bit of a split between the Prime Minister and Defense Minister Ehud Barak. If you'd like to address that as well.
Yeah, sure.
Don't mean to put you on this.
You know, the Minister of Defense, as some of you know, already visited Chicago, and I had such a headache at the follow-up of the visit, so I think I should keep some distance. But let me, if that's okay with you, Steve, speak more about Iran and less
by the way,
about...
it was the Defense Minister who confirmed this report of a possible attack and also the deferment of that enriched uranium by the Iranians.
Well, I don't know that if he says that he confirmed that Israel was at the verge of attack, I don't know. But even when he was here, he met some people and he spoke about it. What happened was that this goes back to all this talk about red lines, which was somehow misunderstood by many people because this is really a complicated issue. One very clear red line is the amount of enriched uranium, because there can be all kinds of red lines, but it's very hard to assess the red lines. One very significant red line that cannot be ignored is the amount of enriched uranium to 20%. I don't want to bother you with all kinds of technical dimensions, but what happened was that the Iranian enriched, I think in order to build a bomb you need one bomb 240 kilograms of enriched uranium. They reached to a point of 200 kilograms, and what they've decided, since they saw that the international community is becoming nervous, to divert 100 of the 200 kilograms into medical uses, as you've just said, Steve. But again, I think what is important here is not the technical dimension, but the political one. I think the major problem with the Iranians is the feeling that they have that they can still manipulate, that is in order not to say bluff, the international community. As my colleague here knows, the Iranians known to be very good merchants. They have their bazaar, and I still believe they consider the international community to be part of their bazaar. But instead of selling carpets, they are trying to get a nuclear bomb. And they really don't feel that they are facing, I would say, adamant international community that is willing to draw a line on the sand and to tell them that's it. They still believe that they can manipulate, they can still bluff the community, the international community. And indeed, at some point when they thought, hang on, maybe we went too far, they went back. Because unlike what people think, the Iranians, you spoke about the importance of ideology in running a state. As much as they are ideologists, I don't think they want to commit a political suicide. And the day the mullahs will understand that one more step might be their last step, they will pull back. I think this is what the Prime Minister had in mind when he spoke about red lines. Because he said, if you don't have red lines, they go one more inch and one more inch and one more inch. They have to understand that if they go one more step before, on top of what, or over what is defined, this might be the end of the mullahs. They will never make this step.
So quickly, two questions. You speak about the belief that the Iranians have. So there's the belief that the Iranians have, and then there's the reality. So the Iranians, in your opinion, believe that there's not enough international pressure to bear, or they're not taking that pressure seriously.
Exactly.
But do you feel the reality is that the United States, the EU, the UN have definitively drawn lines, definitively set boundaries in order to curtail Iran getting a nuclear bomb?
Actually, the red lines are there. The question is more if those red lines has to be public or not public, and I don't want, obviously, to get into the debate. I think the international community, and again, we're having now one administration. I don't know what will be in the 7th of November, but I think the international community is serious. But I'm not sure this is what the Iranians think. And let me say one more thing. Iran is not only an Israeli problem. It's a regional problem, it's an international problem. Hence, the solution needs to be an international one. If Iran will manage to lay its hand on a nuclear bomb, the small stabilities that you see now in the Middle East will be gone. The Middle East will be chaos. There will be a nuclear arm race in the Middle East. All the proxies of Iran, like Hezbollah, like Hamas, like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, like Syria, they will act as mad because the sponsor is going to be a nuclear one, not anymore a conventional one. And I'm not talking even about the missiles, the Shihab 3 and 4 that can hit the heart of Europe. So I think the challenge is an international and a regional one. Hence, the solution to the Iranian challenge should be an international one.
Mr. Refaat, the Israeli government maintains that the Arab states are just as concerned, if not more so concerned, about the nuclear capability of Iran as Israel is. But then you'll read reports that these same Arab leaders are going to the United States saying, put the brakes on this. We're concerned that an Israeli attack will have horrible blowback on our country. So which is true?
Both. Both. To start with this issue, it's a huge file, but I'll try to be very focused and maybe pinpointing where does Egypt stand. Iran, as a signatory to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, has the right to develop the nuclear technology and sciences. Yet, they do not have the right to get into weaponizing their, making a bomb. Iran has never stated they are going to build a bomb. Actually, they had an edict from a religious edict, and they're a very ideological system. They have an edict from Khomeini, the late Khomeini, that actually it is very un-Islamic to build a bomb. Yet, Iran has maintained this policy of ambiguity and seemed to be bent on developing its nuclear know-how. Whether they would have, they have made a decision to build the bomb or not, I think I understand that nobody wants to wait until we finally face a bomb or not. Apparently, as you mentioned, right, both of you, that countries in the Middle East will be very uncomfortable with the emergence of a new country, second country within, apart from Israel, there will be new country that has a nuclear bomb as well. So
I'm sorry, are we going to make news? Will Israel acknowledge that it has nuclear weapons? Okay.
Just like that, Iranians. That's why Egypt has always been really trying to advocate the idea of a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East.
But Mr. Refaat, could you see that people, like, for instance, the Israelis, the U.S., could say that there's a bit of a contradiction there in that you're leaning very hard, the Iranians may maintain, you're leaning very hard about its right to have or not have a nuclear weapon, yet at the same time, part of the argument you'll use in back channels of why Iran is getting a nuclear weapon is because of Israel's nuclear program. So it seems like the Arab states at times want to have it both ways.
No, partly. I think Iran is also. I cannot say that they are trying to build a bomb. I cannot. I don't think. We suspect that they might take such decision. But I think also that because the ideological nature of the regime, they might think that the bomb is the ultimate defensive weapon to retain the system, to protect the system, to disband any threats for the regime change.
Do you both support the continuing of sanctions or the hardening of sanctions?
Iran at the moment has 3 tiers of sanctions. They have a UN, an EU, and an American. The most really, I would say, painful is the American, because it has to do with the central bank and it has to do with the transfer of money. They cannot even sell their oil. Their oil output has gone down. Their exports of oil has gone down. Iran today exports oil almost half of what the Shah of Iran used to export before the revolution in 1979. So Iran is in really difficult situation. And I am this is my personal opinion, I think that the Iranians, having this culture of the bazaar mentality, as you say, they are also the masters of the chess, the invented chess. So I think dealing with, yes, not only selling carpets. So they sell carpets, they invented chess, and they're very, very smart people. Yet, even smart people, when ideology mixes, get into the game, ideology ruins everything.
Do you support the hardening of sanctions or the continuation?
The sanctions are making real effect. Iran with Egypt are members to what we call the D8, Developing 8. We have Turkey with us, we have Nigeria, we have Indonesia, we have Malaysia, we have Pakistan and Bangladesh, 8 countries. They are developing countries, and all of them actually are classified by Goldman Sachs are among the next 11. So because of the potential, we have the potential because of the young population that each of these 8 countries. But when we sit together in the group, within the group, and then our Iranians try to explain to us that they are open for business, they want to make business, but really nobody can do business with them. So the sanctions are truly making an effect. The pressure is making political and military pressure is making effect. And I really hope at one point they would never be stupid to get into military confrontation and at the right moment. And I think this is the right moment to strike a deal.
Excellency.
Yeah, I'll just add one small thing. I agree again with everything that Majid said. I only say that those sanctions that Majid spoke about needs to be backed with a reliable military strike threat. This is not to say that eventually there will be a military strike, but the stronger and the more reliable the threat, the military threat there is, then the sanctions will be much more effective. Because if the Iranians will believe that eventually there is an international reason to put an end to this project one way or another, this will only delay the military strike.
Very good, thank you. So we're going to go over just a couple of minutes because I want to give time for questions and answers, but of course we have to talk about the relationship between your 2 countries. Obviously the relationships over the long run, I would say you'd both say have been good since this 1979 peace accord. The Arab Spring, recent elections, people from the outside are looking, and I'm sure from within there's concern and there's definitely an anxiousness about maintaining that peace accord and strengthening that peace accord. There was a lawsuit that recently came before the Egyptian court, and the court ruled that only the president could actually break the treaty. So could we maybe discuss that relationship, if you want to go back as far back as you like and come to the present and where the future is going to go? Mr. Gilad, we'll start with you.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry I brought it too early, but I'll just repeat in short what I said. I think the 1978 peace accord is the cornerstone of the relationship. Indeed, relationships have been bumpy. Not always it was such a warm relationship that we wanted, but yet it's not about the warmth of the relationship, it's about the stability of the relationship. I think Israel and Egypt has some hot potatoes, some issues of, I would say, common interest to address. I think what's happening in Sinai is a matter of common interest to establish stability in Sinai. I think as we agreed to address together the Iranian challenge for the stability in the Middle East is something that we would like, we need to, maybe there is a common interest. There is a very wide common interest between Israel and Egypt that can be brought under the title of peace and stability in the wider Middle East. By the way, I think also to establish peaceful relationship between Israel and the Palestinian people is also a common interest that both of us will need to address. But all this is pending on the fact that if we do have a stable relationship between the 2 countries, I believe that just as it was in the past, even after the Egyptian people decided that they would like to see a new administration in Cairo, this will still be the case.
Mr. Refaat.
Thank you. Apparently, the relation between Egypt and Israel is not only important to Israel and Egypt, is also important to America. is actually, I consider them one of the three pillars that American foreign policy wants from Egypt. Actually, some American politicians and the people in the industry said, we need to establish three things in our future relation with Egypt. We would like Egypt to keep the peace treaty with Israel, and we would like to have the preferred movement of military assets through the Suez Canal, and we would like also to keep the military assistance and military and economic assistance to Egypt. These three things. And let me be very clear. The overwhelming majority of the Egyptian people would like to keep the peace treaty with Israel intact. No problem. Egypt has always been a very peaceful nation throughout its very long history. I do not recall that Egypt has ever harbored expansion outside its natural and historic borders, with maybe one rare occasion that was in 200 years ago. So the overwhelming majority of Egyptians at the moment would like to keep the peace treaty with Israel as is, and we have no problem with that. The president have made it very clear that Egypt will respect its international commitments, and not only with Israel, but with all commitments. And he is adamant to make this very clear in a very blunt way. However, there is a specific element of the peace treaty that also a big chunk of the Egyptian population at the moment would like to see it perhaps addressed. And this is about the presence of Egyptian military in the Sinai. The Sinai is divided into zones according to the peace treaty, and in specific zones, Egyptian army doesn't have the right to deploy with the specific numbers in these zones. A lot of the young people in Egypt, and by the way, Egypt is a very young nation. It's a very old state, but very young nation. We have 30% of the population is between the age bracket of 15 and 25. 30% of this population. The majority of the people in Egypt, especially the young ones, perceive this division of Sinai into zone as some sort of reduced sovereignty and would like to visit some of the portions. But not at the moment, I think. This issue is, but it might not come to the surface, but it is under the surface, and it will appear in the future, maybe when Egypt finishes its democratic structure.
So let me jump in and talk about the Sinai.
For a minute? On Sinai, Israel is not the first country to pull back from an area that was occupied against the demilitarization of this area. If there will be a Palestinian state, it will be demilitarized. If Israel is going to pull back from the Golan Heights in any future agreement with Syria, it will be demilitarized. And the whole idea here is that if we pull back from Sinai, so there will not be any war threat on the border. Indeed, the situation currently in Sinai, I think, needs to be addressed, and I think there is a way to address it, but this, I think, is leaning on establishing a good dialogue between the current Egyptian administration and the current Israeli administration. This dialogue is not, I think, in the place it needs to be, and surely I would encourage your people and you encourage our administration to go back to the place it needs to be, because the Sinai is really the most burning issues that both states needs to be.
And currently there's a fence under construction about 250 kilometers that's due to be finished by the end of the year.
Indeed, and again, that's exactly the same issue. When Israel pulled back from Sinai in 1979, nobody knew that Sinai is going to turn to the hub of terror that it turned. So we have invested a huge sum of money in erecting this fence. And again, but I believe that the real solution to the problem of Sinai can be addressed only by Israel and Egypt together.
Mr. Refaat, there have been ongoing military operations in the Sinai to root out what the government has called extremists. Unfortunately, getting caught up in the crossfire are African migrants from Eritrea and Sudan. There have been reports on both sides that military personnel in both your governments have engaged in abuse, detention of these migrants. Would you like to address those reports?
Because of diminished military presence in specific part of Sinai, the local population have indulged into illegal activities of human transfer to Israel, and to and from mainly, trade, illegal trade, either in narcotics or arms. And this is apparently a threat to Israel and to Egypt as well. The securing Sinai is purely an Egyptian business. This is to have to be very clear. And Egypt is able. And by the way, military is not the only way to address ideology and extremism. No. It has to go also with a group or a mix of economic, social, and to give them answers. Concerning the illegal immigrants, by the way, Egypt has no less than 4 million Sudanese living in Egypt. 4 million. We have very difficult borders from the east, the west, the south, very difficult ones. 4 million Sudanese are living in Egypt. But there has been the interest for a lot of people from Eritrea, from Ethiopia, to move through Egypt and go into illegal transfer of people into Israel. And Israel also is trying to convince them to go back to their home countries, sending them back with some money and so on. So the problem that these people, they're not really, we're not really dealing with people walking in the desert and being fired upon by the Egyptian army. No, we are dealing with extremely well-equipped gangs that actually transfer these innocent people through a very dangerous border through Egypt and getting inside Israel through the
Steve, I have to amend you.
By the way, there are about 60,000 illegal African immigrants in Israel.
Exactly, that's part of the answer. I know of many cases in which the Bedouins, who are the inhabitants of Sinai, dealt in a very wrong way with those people. I know of few cases attributed to Egyptian personnel. I don't know of any case that an Israeli army personnel have dealt with those people that are trying to steal the border, to smuggle the border, not in a human way. On the contrary, the problem is exactly the opposite.
Okay, but there are human rights reports to the contrary of what you just said.
No, the problem is exactly the opposite. Because we didn't know how to deal with the problem, because there was no fence, because our soldiers, they deal in what I would call here, I don't want to offend anybody, a Jewish way. What they did, they took those people and they brought them to Tel Aviv. They didn't know what to do with them. That's why we are stuck today now with 60,000 people, and now we're going to fly them back to where they come from. We signed an agreement with Sudan, with South Sudan, not with Sudan. With Sudan we have other dealings. And we still try to take them back to Eritrea, giving them money. The problem was exactly the opposite. I think the problem was that we have been, you can't say too human, but we addressed this problem not in a reasonable way. And I'm criticizing my own government. Sure. That's why places nowadays like Eilat, South Tel Aviv, you have tens of thousands.
Okay, I have to push back a little bit to both of you gentlemen on this issue. Now, your interior minister made a comment that we should just jail them all and make life so miserable for them that they'll go back, sort of like Governor Romney says, self-deportation. Make things so miserable that the migrants go back. Now, your justice ministry stated that that's not the Israeli policy and we're not going to enforce such a policy. But you do have voices within your government that have spoken very harshly about these migrants. They live in very substandard conditions in I believe, parts of Tel Aviv. And you don't quite know what to do with them. And so, and myself being sympathetic to what do you do with these people, but there are numerous reports that when they encounter military personnel, whether they're caught in a crossfire, whether they are being taken hostage or so forth, that they are ending up being killed or end up in being treated.
The problem was not in the encountering of the military personnel. The problem was that when they were brought through our assistance, either to Eilat or to the southern suburbs of Tel Aviv, they established themselves in the poor areas of Tel Aviv and Eilat. And the people got really upset. Look, I'm sure Mr. Majed and myself, we are not poor people. We live in the most, in the better neighborhoods of Cairo, of Tel Aviv. We don't really get to see those people. But I must tell you, I sympathize with people that are feeling that this is not their house anymore, because the poor neighborhoods of Israel have been, as you alluded to, 60,000 people came from Eritrea, from South Sudan, that wanted to find what I call an economic shelter in Israel. And you know, indeed, it took us a very long time to understand that there is here what we call a strategic problem. I think the way we try to solve this problem is a human way in which we try, many of those people that go into vocational training in Israel before we fly them back to South Sudan. Currently, we have an agreement only with South Sudan. Eritrea is a problem, but we do try to address a problem that we ignored too long time, and here I criticize ourselves as me being part of the government. And indeed, at the end of the day, as you said, the Minister of Home Affairs said what he had to say, but the Ministry of Justice said this is not the way how we are going to address the problem.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Roey Gilad, Mr. Refaat, Consul Generals of Israel and Egypt, please give them a hand. So we're running a little bit behind, so we'll have about 5 minutes for questions from the audience.
Apparently, in Gaza, it's still an occupied territory. Its sea is closed, its air is closed, and it is sealed. That's why we have the tunnels. We have one crossing for people. I think Israel have four, for both people and goods. It's a huge problem for Egypt. Egypt, as you have heard, is a big country with a relatively big population, and we are challenged. Gaza is more than 1 million people living in a closed area. They need electricity, they need medicine, they need food, they need water, they need everything. So during the last few years, since the transformation to Hamas power in control in Gaza, Israel has clamped down and tried to restrict the access of goods, and they bent more to get their goods through the tunnels through the Egyptian border. Egyptians are, of course, they are sympathizers with the plight of people living in Gaza. But at the same time, also, we are uncomfortable because Egypt is now almost providing Gaza's population with subsidized food, subsidized energy, subsidized medicine. Everything that you get, 90% of what you consume in Gaza is actually smuggled through the Egyptian border. This is also a problem to Egypt, and we would have really loved that during the last few months and maybe in the near future, Israel would take a more lax position towards the Gaza Strip and its people. Remember, Israel used to give access to workers. I think the number was 200,000 permit. Now it is 10,000. They have no way. The UNRWA is making fabulous work, but the UNRWA is providing the minimum. Egypt is also providing the minimum, and I think the blockage has to be eased, and it has to be eased through legal channels, through Israeli crossing points. We only have one, and it is it's only for people, not for goods. In the past, there has been a European plan to actually work, open Gaza, the Rafah crossing, the one between Egypt and the Gaza, for both goods. But I don't think at the moment it's still one of the viable options. But I think the responsibility, really the main responsibility, still lies with Israel on relaxing not only the crossing of goods into Gaza, but also the work permits to the people who should work and get some money.
I'm glad we reached to a point when there is some His Excellency and I do not agree, so you do not think that we agree on anything.
We don't want to disappoint you.
Exactly. The Gaza issue has two dimensions, a strategic one and a human one. From a strategic point of view, Gaza is being controlled by the Hamas, who support the eradicate of the state of Israel. Everything that I said before about the need to address the Palestinian problem and to go for the two-state solution is referring the people to the people who are controlling Ramallah, the Palestinian Authority. With the Hamas, there is no way we can reach any agreement because the Hamas, very simply, they do not believe there is a room for a Jewish state in the Middle East. They say day and night, and I think we should believe them. And to put deeds into words, they also implement it by firing a barrage of mortars and missiles against Israel day in and day out. I think 70 rockets during the last 48 hours. As a result, 1 million people living around Gaza are living in shelters. This is unbelievable. Just imagine what would happen if you would, what an outcry would have been here if this would have been the situation. And this is after we pulled back from Gaza, and we thought that the problem had ended. But then the Hamas took over, and the Palestinians have been torn between the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah and the Hamas in Gaza. We are stuck in a situation which is really for us is considered as a strategic challenge. However, there is also the humanitarian dimension. There is much that Israel is doing, and I would ask, please, all of you to log into the website of the Israeli consulate here, because there is much that Israel is doing under these really very complicated circumstances, not so much bringing workforce from Gaza to the 20,000 people you spoke about are mainly from the West Bank.
Yes.
To bring them from Gaza Strip, I don't think this is impossible. This is possible under the current situation. However, there are hundreds of trucks crossing those 4 checkpoints that His Excellency spoke about, going from Israel into Gaza every day, in trying to make sure that there will not be a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Israel could be a good player. They are. They have done great peace deal with Egypt and then with Israel, despite the fact Egypt started with Jordan. Egypt started the peace endeavor. We had the peace deal with Israel. Jordan followed. And Israel actually pulled back from, not only from Gaza, but from South Lebanon as well. But they did it unilaterally. We would have loved Israel to sign a peace deal with Lebanon. We would have loved before Israel.
It didn't last for a day.
Yeah, but the UN was demarcation effort. But I mean, that is my point. When Egypt started peace in the Middle East, we did not start to have peace with Israel only as Egypt. No. The Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, actually, if you read it, it actually opens the door for a regional peace between Egypt and the rest of and Israel on one side. So it is still possible, by the way. When Israel pulled out of Gaza, again, it pulled out from Gaza without any peace deal. But it is, legally speaking, Gaza is occupied territories. Gaza is not freed territory, no. So this is the way I see in the future. Israel could really transform its policy and stop unilateral pulling back from territories. I think the ultimate objective of Israel could simply be signing a peace deal with Lebanon, signing a peace deal with the Palestinians, signing possibly it was close, a signing peace deal with Syria as well, maybe in the future. So this is where I see the ultimate security of Israel, actually, as it really concerns a lot of Americans here. Peace deals. This is what Egypt started.
I think there is only one country who might be more interested in regional peace than Egypt, and this is Israel. Nothing will serve Israeli interest more than a regional peace. And indeed, and I'm coming to your question in a second, and indeed, the twice that Israel have pulled back from an Arab land unilaterally, it ended up with a barrage of fire on our
It didn't work.
But, here I differ from you again, I am not sure that under the current circumstances we can strike any deal with the Lebanese. I agree, I think we all agree with it, not with the Syrians, and even, unfortunately, currently not with the Palestinians. I don't think we can reach a deal with the Palestinians until they put their house in order. And by saying, I mean to put their house in order, to bridge this gap between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and go back to the two-state solution, because currently there is no majority within the Palestinian administration. You don't know, are you talking with Khaled Mashal, or are you talking with Abu Abbas? This is, as for just a quick reaction. Sure. As for you, what you said, sir, I think that the democracy in Israel is not only for the Jewish people. I don't think that's correct. The Arab citizens of Israel, 1 million Arab citizens among 8 million people, do enjoy democracy. And I think that's the reason why eventually whenever we think of a peace accord with Palestinians in which there will be some swap of lands and maybe we shall return some Arab villages to the Palestinian state, they say, no, don't do us favors, we don't want to go there. And I think the reason is that what they enjoy in Israel under the dimension of democracy is something they will not get anywhere else. So in Israel there is democracy for Arab people, for non-Jewish people as well. However, on the second issue, I do agree with you. I think that there is too much input in Israel for the strategic/military establishment, but I think there is hope. I think Israel is changing, and what Steve spoke about, what we had in the last summer where people were pouring in the streets, is part of this change, because Israel is moving from what was known as the Masada mentality into a much more open, liberal society that would like to address problems that are being addressed by American citizens as well. That is to say, a free, open, and civil society.
Well, we certainly put 20 pounds into a 10-pound bag today. So
flowers as well. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Very kind.